Howdy folks, we are back with some more Cosmonarchy today. I'm going to be taking a look at the Shambler, an established Protoss player, taking on Krankendau, a relatively new Zerg player. Let's see what happens in this set of matches. We're going to start off on Derelict 2. It'll be Krankendau in the bottom left and the Shambler in the top right. As the Acropolis tournament has come to a close and Nebelheim has been the victor, it's worth noting that Shambler made it all the way to the Grand Finals, the first time in quite a few tournaments that he had been able to do that. So back to, at the very least, second place ways, if not winning ways. However, we obviously have a lot more to say on the matter with more events coming and going and planned and stuff. So it's an exciting time. It's always exciting during a tournament. That's where you'll see the strongest uptick of games when people are practicing for Acropolis, and especially that Throne Room playoffs series, right? Like that whole section. And, you know, aside from that, it's just, it's quite interesting to imagine what the future will look like with all of the players that have joined us during Acropolis #1, and, you know, where are they going to go from here? What are they going to do next? That's, how are we going to get to that point, and then maybe we get another influx of players during the next tournament? You can imagine it just keeps on going. But I don't have an announcement regarding the next Acropolis tournament, which is sort of like the big center stage 1v1 tournament. However, there will be another 1 versus 1, like sort of, I was going to say single day, but it'll be across 2 days. It'll be a weekend tournament starting on the 25th of May. So that is about 2 weeks from recording, the date of recording. So you can stay tuned for that. And yeah, of course, it'll just be a great time. We'll be bringing you that action live. And I have a feeling that there's going to be some serious antics in some of those games. Now, Shambler is starting his first Zealot. He will be moving across the map with that. I wonder if maybe this was some of the practice that he had prior to the upper final, because this game was played on the 4th of May, which kind of puts the Shambler... I want to say the timing-wise, if I take a look at my own calendar here, the 4th of May was actually on the day of the upper final being played. So yeah, this must have been practice right before that that matchup. Now the worker will not be able to scout too much there from Krankendau. He lost track of it due to the little heckling that Shambler's scribe decided to give. And that's something that we're seeing optimized by players over time, is how do they get their worker in the base and then either keep it alive for a long time or evacuate it, right? And Shambler just immediately leaves after seeing that it's a hatch into pool. Doesn't necessarily need to keep watch of the follow-up, but that might be another thing that we see changed over time is, hey, the worker, you know, you want to stick around and scout of what the follow-up is. But for now, the build orders haven't exactly evolved that sort of reaction. Now, we have 8 Zethra cores out. They will be able to overwhelm the 1 Zealot. However, there are still 2 more, and it's a lot harder to fight the 2 Zealots with your 5 Zethra cores. So this is, you know, he's doing a pretty good job of it. But a lot of them are very vulnerable now, and he picks the target that was higher HP. So Krankendau not able to make the second round happen, but love me some Zeth on Zealot action, I'll say that much. So getting a little bit of chip damage onto those bad boys. When the shields are gone, the Zethra cores deal full damage to Zealot, so that is pretty good. But at this point, this is looking a little bit worse for wear. He is going to put down the K-Grid elsewhere. But yeah, Shambler busy microing 1 Zealot, loses the other. And that's pretty bad news for our Protoss player if he wants to keep the aggression up. Nice surround onto that 1 Zealot. Only 4 health, 1 more Zealot hit. Or Zeth hit, there we go. Ends up going down. More Zeths being produced the whole time. Shambler obviously up ahead in workers, but now he's going to end up losing with the opportunity to maybe try to get some sort of critical mass here of Zealots. He's got 3 more storming down, but I feel like we're very close to Krankendau just holding nice and easy, especially with the Circuith giving the Zealots a few licks here and there. There's 1 in the base, but the rest of them can't really seem to get up. So nice little hold. It was I haven't seen that kind of like streaming on in with 3 gates, but this looks very similar to a play that Shambler had practiced and then deployed versus Nebelheim in the upper final. So it's kind of interesting as to see that in action, right? So how long are the Zeths going to charge out? You can see the number of Zealots just getting way too high for Zeths alone to deal with. But the expansion timing is there for Krankendau. It'll be there for Shambler as well. And his Zealot even scarpers off towards the upper left of the map. What else do we have? We're going to go up to 4 hatch. Krankendau thinking about what's coming next. Man, with this kind of force, I would be tempted to go into, Zorkis for Lakiz, but I know that at this stage in the game's meta development, everybody was just cranking out Hydras, right? So, and there it is. The Hydrath Den is on the way in the main. A second Kagrant. I don't think... Yeah, you can still path between these. So. I was going to say, I don't think that's a full wall. I'm just looking forward to when we can deploy, like, the Ascozi for the first time. Imagine the first Ascozi cast over, dude. Imagine that. It'll be crazy. Now, we have the Zealots charging in. We have the Hierophants with them. Versus Zeths, I don't know that the Hierophants are particularly significant, but, you know, they're consistent damage dealers. And it is raw Zeth here. And at this point, you know, Crank is in a little bit of trouble. Okay, we're going to have the fight engage. The Ecclesiast was left at the base, so that could have been a lot of shield healing that ends up going by the wayside. But with no focus fire onto the wounded Zealots, that's still quite the advantageous position here for Shambler. Looks like he will be able to destroy the hatch, and now firmly in the driver's seat when it comes to the setup of the game. The complexion of the macro. Obviously Crank down in workers, but Zergers like that. Now, the good thing that Crank has is a lot of production, so he can just charge forward with all of his Zeths, and yeah, he's able to break down. Most of the Zealots are gone. The Hierophants at that point will be easy to surround. He's transitioned into full Hydra production, so he doesn't really have a front line, but the Hydras themselves should be capable of dealing with this. However, I am still worried about his position, especially as this embassy goes down. That's the big thing that makes me think, oh, damn. But the other thing that you could think about here is it looks like we've got 2 workers out of 3 on the ridge. And that's something that I feel like overall, when we're factoring that in, if that extra worker goes to the ridge and then maybe you go for the ski-back scab and you just lighten up on the Hydra production for a little bit, the switch into heavy air, you know, especially if I'm imagining you're going to go ahead and drop a hatch again, that could be a counteraction. So Shambler is already thinking about that because he puts down the second pylon. He doesn't have any static defense there, but obviously a Matrix can help out. Yeah, I don't know. It's looking fairly standard as far as, yeah, is he thinking about it now? Yeah, okay, there's the Matrix. So we've seen, just like we've seen Zerg go for Larvosks fairly frequently, where previously they just weren't making them at all. We had the Matrix emerge as a good anti-harassment tool. And also in PvP, you'd put like multiple of them off to the side or whatever. And they would just, like, it's just so much sustain that they would provide. And that's really cool. Like, if you're not against Terran, the Matrix is pretty good. Now, we've actually got 2 of them. The second one is now coming up on the natural. So yeah, this is really solid. Like, well insulated from attacks. The Matrix will provide itself with a little bit of healing. But also, most importantly, it'll provide all the workers around it a little bit of shield sustain, right? So it's cool. It's a cool idea. The way that it works is that it releases a healing pulse for shields, specifically, around itself when it attacks and around its victim, its target. So if it attacks a unit up here, then all of the allies in, say, this area will be healed from that unit, and also all of the allies are within about 3 range of the Matrix itself will be healed too. So it's pretty powerful when you think about it like that. The Ecclesiast has the same on-hit passive where units around a target will be healed for their shields. But the Matrix does both that and has around it, like around the structure itself when it attacks. So it's pretty cool. Very thematic for Protoss is like a defensive tower option. Instead of having like a shield battery structure, like in StarCraft 1 and StarCraft 2, the idea behind it is that you get ahead, you get better, and you get more shields out by sustaining through combat, which I think is a cooler way to deploy the same sort of thematic. We also have flash shielding, so we don't really need shield batteries as much, but I think that's just a more neat, interesting way to do it. Now, the third base is not in sight for either player yet, but we do have an Ancestral Archive started. I'm trying to find out where that is. Okay, up here in the main. So the decision to build it in the main versus in the natural is a question of, is this going to be, this is safer in the main, but it's a lot farther away from affecting change on the map from the main compared to the natural. So when we factor that in, the concern would be, for me anyway, you know, how soon can I get it, can I get, like, heavy units like the Uptecton moving across, right? So that's a separate concern, of course. But now, Krankendau is going to go for the Zorkiz. He has a couple of circuits. Remember, the Witness has been spying this attack for the whole time. So Shambler is going to commit with this Gateway army before his Ancestral Archives is actually factoring in. And Krankendau, meanwhile, is just producing units and not even necessarily microing his Hydras back. So now he will see what more he can do. And this attack seems like it was a little bit ill-advised from the Shambler, despite having a full view of what was going on. And in fact, since he only has the ranged units left, he is going to be in a tough spot here. The Hydras can trade very nicely versus these. We've even got some Zeths to add some DPS to it. And yeah, I'm looking at the way that this is going, and there are 4 Zealots coming out now, but there's going to be a lot of ranged units hitting the deck, falling by the wayside. Good attempt at surrounds there, but not quite going to make the deal. That immediately removes a lot of pressure from the situation. Obviously, there's that one Zealot blocking the on-site hatch. So that's something that, yeah, Crank is going to have to deal with at some point. He's going to press his advantage, and maybe a little bit too far. But the Zealots are dying a little bit slower, thanks to the Ecclesiasts being in the fight. But those will now be focused down. And indeed, the Droleth did end up dying. So, yeah, at this point, we only have 5 Hydras on the other side of the map. He's going to be able to kill off a couple of extra units there, but he does need to turret tail and run away. And does he even realize that his worker died? Yeah, okay, I think he's figured it out. He's going to send his Zeths after him. Oh my god. Zealot died anyway. Alright, so the third base is going to be set up, but it's late compared to what the Shambler has been able to do, and late in general, although I think Shambler built his offsite. There is this annoying bug where if you don't have like full active vision, you haven't actually scouted the structure location, it'll say that it's invalid placement or valid placement incorrectly until you actually scout it for real. So that's something we should fix, because that's just a weird side effect of our implementation of what we call quasi-fog, where like the map is even like you can see the map and the resources in the quasi-fog without ever no player has gone here, and this is also what the players see if they go to 12 o'clock. So it's just a little bit annoying that ends up happening. Now we have a lot of Lakizilisks in production. The Zorkiz Shroud is up and running. Love to see the Lakizilisks as an option, but you need Ovoliths so that you can snipe the Witnesses. And the Witness was there and was hanging out for quite a while. And so Shambler didn't exactly hide his Witness positioning. Like, he's doing a pretty good job of hiding it now, but then he moves it anyway. So Crank should be aware that that's happening. We need to see an Ovolith be produced. Indeed, one of them is. Now, if this attack hits sooner, that can be a pretty strong option. There is an Uptecton coming. But I think the Ovolith will come down sooner. With Iral Iris heading, that's going to mean that Tier 2 is on the way. So that transition point for Krankendau is coming. And he is thinking about making a couple of additional workers. Yeah, he's transferring some off from his natural. He's going to go ahead and push out forward, which I'm a little bit worried, because he doesn't really know what the Shambler is making. But now the Witness is out, so blinding the Shambler for the time being, and charging forward thanks to the Zoryus. Nice Lakiz spines. Just to zone away everything. And you know what? This Uptecton's all by itself. Krankendau, if he was paying close attention to that, he might consider diving on it. But instead, he's just going to have his force lightly peppered with plasma. Going to see if he can pursue the bulk of the Gateway army and then maybe attack the third. I like the aggression. Remember, there is no Witness yet for the Shambler. It's something I think he only made one of them. So he's kind of cut off reinforcements from this point, using that Zorkiz passive, or Zoryus passive, to improve the Lakizilisk movement speed. Now that's a scary vision. Look at that. They're moving on so fast. Well, the problem now is that the Tectons are out in force, and they will be able to splash onto the Lakiz from any unit standing on top of them. So that is a little bit unfortunate. But all of the Zealots have pretty much died. There's a couple more coming in now. But there's a very great victory in terms of killing off all the melee. It's just that the Shambler cleaned it up a lot easier than what Crank was hoping for, thanks to that Uptecton move. So he's going to throw down some anti-surface defenses. He is making a bunch of Hydras. He is upgrading his den into the Swamp, which doesn't really afford him too many choices here. I would unironically say that a bunch of Gorgs would be pretty nice here. Now, the problem is you need something to deal with all the Dracodons, but if the Uptectons are a concern, then you can go for Mass Air. I just feel like he's not going to be able to effect change enough soon. You know, he didn't thin out the Gateway army enough, and he didn't kill any of the Uptectons. So you kind of needed to do one of those if you were going to hold on here. Otherwise, I think Shambler is just going to be able to make the death push happen from this point onward. A bunch of the Hydras ended up falling to splash. They're not being spread out. More Zealots coming in from the top rope, including a Patriarch to keep them healthy. And that's going to be GG. Well, you know, Crank was, he didn't roll over and die. I'll say that much. And that was after a very difficult early game. So, hats off to him for responding to what the Shambler did and staying in the game for as long as he had. And still being able to say, hey, I can make a big attack and I can make things happen and be somewhat proactive. Let's go to game number 2 in this set and see if Crank can do even better. And we are live now with Krankendau in the bottom right of Sideshow against the Shambler in the top left. I just want to say that this was obviously still a match on release, if that wasn't obvious from the Uptecton graphic alone. We will be casting some pre-release games fairly soon, including all of the exciting changes that brings, like the ability to select your color, a preferred color, and not only that, a preferred color per race, and even randomly have vacillate between a number of colors. So you can choose that you want, yellow and orange and sun glow and electric orange, whatever. Say you really like gold and orange as colors. Well, you can choose to randomly get one of those, as long as it's valid in the tile set. Like, you can't pick a light blue color on this particular map, because it's a nice map. So, Krankendau is sending a very forward and fast worker. For a second, I honestly had the vision that he was going to build a hatch here. And I was like, what a madman, because he had 300 minerals, but no, he was just scouting super early. I wonder what the value of scouting super early is versus Protoss. Maybe on this map specifically, Crank is a little bit concerned with the idea of it being a lattice opener. He wants to see if he needs to prepare himself for fast air units like the Vassal. But it will be a gateway first from the Shambler. And Krankendau last time, he's still getting a sense for when he can and can't attack. And I think under normal circumstances, that would have been a fine attack timing. But when you had to rebuild your natural, not really, right? Your opponent's still a little bit ahead, and you've got to play differently to claw back the lead. However, either way, I like the idea of putting on pressure. Maybe if the attack had been executed as a pincer to try to spread the forces coming in from the sort of mid-left of Derelict into the thirds, where you can attack on multiple fronts. Maybe that would have been better. Maybe it would have been better to focus down and isolate the little packs of units that Shambler had. Because there's still play there from that position when the move out started. It's just, oh no! Oh no! Oh no. Well, at least he got him out in the end. It would have been heartbreaking if the worker had just escaped. And his own scout does escape. But it works out, I guess. It all worked out in the end. Colon D. I like myself some colon D. We need more colon D around here. No D colons, though. D colon is for sad days. And today is not a sad day. Today's a day where there's a Cosmonarchy cast uploaded, dude. That can't be a sad day. Almost like every day is epic. We got a bunch of Zets coming for Krankendau to hold the fort. And it's not going to be Mass Zealot this time. And so one Hierophant. And there's a burrow trap in play. Oh! And it's been sprung. And the Circuit is here as well to get a couple extra damage dealt. My God. That was a phenomenal trap. The question is, can he outrun the Hierophant? Is it even going to matter? Tickle. Yeah, keep the shields. Don't let the shields start. Oh, the surround. Oh my God. Now that was just that was the most ridiculous timing I've ever seen. Where they unburrow as the K-Grit finishes turning into a Circuit, and then they chase the goddamn thing down. It'll be a fast rogue gallery here for the Shambler. Looks like he's going to be practicing that charlatan style that we're all very familiar with, but first he needs to get through the Vagrants. Nebline was playing an FFA after winning Acropolis, and he was like, what? When did Vagrants cost 150 minerals? They got nerfed? And no, they were always 150 minerals. He just had no idea. Imagine if they were cheaper. How ridiculously cost-efficient they already are. Now, we do have double Ecclesiast coming as well. That's for the padding here. Vagrants are pretty good as, like... they kind of, like, operate in this weird vicinity where they're kind of damage dealers in certain compositions and certain situations, and in other times, they're just, like, replacements for Zealots. Like, I think versus Terran, people have used them as, like, the chaff and the meat instead of building Mass Zealot. Because at some point, the Hurricanes come out, right? Although I think when the Hurricanes come out and you get Uptectons in return, you can deal with them pretty easily at that point. Ah, Shambler, you could have just right-clicked your ridge to look like a Gosu gamer, and then you wouldn't have had to move your Zealot. Expansion coming down for both of our players. Of course, Crank is up-tempo in that respect. The Zealot pressure not delaying both players' expansions this time around, so we might actually end up getting a longer macro game out of this one. The second Hierophant strikes, but the Zeth escapes with 1 health. Very unlike the first Hierophant's fate. I do like how Crank has been positioning his units. That's something that I can always say about Crank, is that he tends to position his units pretty well. He did have a little bit of a fluff on that versus the Uptecton shots raining in from all different walks of life in the last game. So a lot of his units were kind of stuck on top of the Lakiz and allowing the splash damage to kill them without actually having any detection, but is what it is. I mean, if the Zealots stayed alive in that fight, which they didn't for most of it, then they would have been able to stand on top of the Lakiz anyway and reveal them, because in Cosmonarchy, when you stand atop a burrowed unit, it is revealed. So it's a very, very tight area around that unit, mind you. Like, you basically have to be colliding with the graphic, but it does end up working out. So, Avaleth here for detection. I like the idea of being proactive versus the inevitable witness. You should also be scouting with that Avaleth yourself if you can. That's something that Nebelheim has shown us in his games versus Protoss, and just in general. But the Hydras are already here. So it's Hydra Zeth, the Brood War comp, and it's against a sort of menagerie of Protoss forces. You can see here that Krankendau has allowed Shambler in, although he doesn't yet know that Shambler is in. But the significance of this is that Shambler is going to confirm there's no third, which, you know, is fine. That doesn't need to be a third right now. But it's going to be really hard for him to break into this position. The one Zealot is just here to scout, and it does end up getting a little bit deeper than you might expect, so he'll see the gas part. And the Zeth, on the other hand, is not going to confirm the Nexus just yet. But he'll obviously know that, okay, yeah, sure, you've expanded, that makes sense. Now, the Avaleth here is going to come in here and spot the idle production. A couple of Vagrants to pepper it down. Pylon. Oh, Embassy, okay. So, you know, Krankendau using the, to good effect, using the feature that we added where if you have detection on a unit, you can select it and you'll see the queue and you'll see the production time. Gallery. Yes. That's right. You. What does that make? He's never even seen it before. Hey, if you move your Avaleth back over there, you can mouse over the unit and see what happens. Tall men. I guess he means the Vagrant. Slender Man? No. Dude, I haven't thought about, isn't it just called Slender Man? Dude, it's been so long. Haven't thought about that in ages. A couple of Zets getting caught on their way out, but another one will still make it out there for scouting. A lot of workers here. Good anti... Well, everything. I was going to say surface, and then I was going to say air, and then I was like, wait, he's setting up for both. So I think he's going to be all right. The Zorius is available thanks to the Zorka Shroud being done. He's also upgraded his den into a scab, so he's indicating that maybe he wants Bactylisks here, and that's a great choice versus Vagrants in my opinion, because, you know, versus this comp in general, the only thing you really need to keep some Hydras around for is the Zealots. And I mean, technically, if you have enough Zorius and Bacts, then the Zealots themselves aren't going to matter too much. He's also making some Lakiz first, so okay, I don't mind that. That's a good option too. He's got a lot of resources in the bank, actually. I wonder what Crank is going to be spending on next. But yeah, if you have like 8 Bactyls, then this Vagrant Ecclesiast Hierophant camp is just going to end up getting slaughtered. The soft contain here is unlikely to stick around for too much longer. But despite making the scab, he hasn't actually used it to make any units yet. He's queued up 4 more pairs of Lakiz. His Avaleth is observing the fact that we have a sponsor for this whole tournament. And of course, of the maps themselves, I guess, in some way. Sponsored the maps. You know, I know AMD literally sponsored, obviously, Radeon, but before that, Vermeer. So, you know, MH. I don't know what that means. Did he mean to S his MH? Or what was the MH? It's not even NH, which is New Hampshire, which is actually covered by the pickup partner, if you wanted to move around New Hampshire. Actually, we're going to be moving pretty soon. Maybe I should ask if he'll cover Massachusetts. I'm pretty sure he will. Dude. Yeah. I don't know if we'll be able to afford his services, but we'll have to give that a shot. That would be peak simulation if I'm like, hey, dude, want to sponsor my own move? The Vagrants are going to come in here and try to get rid of that Ovaleth. Not quite. One of the Vagrants does end up going down. The Lakiz are really far back. I mean, that only is going to affect change if Shambler actually commits to an attack here. I do love that this Zeth is over in this spot, but it could actually be... What? I don't know what happened there. Then the engram shot at something. Maybe it was the Ovaleth. Okay, anyway, we have an actual attack happening, so let's focus on that instead of wondering what Shambler was attacking. We do have the Zorius helping the Hydras to get on top of the Vagrants, and the Zealots are doing nothing in this fight. They're all the way on the back foot. Could be deselected, and now we have the engagement attempted here, but the Lakiz burrow is obviously pretty damn good, so that's going to carve through all of the front line. And now there's a question of, can you get on top of the slippery back line without, you know, any obvious issues happening there, especially with the fact that you have to burrow your Lakizilisks, unlike the Bactyls. But the Bactyls can't really keep up at all, so I guess it's a question of positioning, right? Trying to focus down the Zorius before they can achieve a great stack. But stuck on the bridges now, evicted from the original spot. We've got all of the Lakiz heading up on the other side, maybe to cut off this army. Oh my god, and this Nexus is almost certainly going to have to get canceled. I like Krankendau's position pretty good here. He's going to go ahead and isolate the couple of Hierophants over here. Now, this is a rough position for the Shambler, but he can deal with some of these Lakizilisks. He really shouldn't be stopping to fight this, though, at least in my opinion. He is going to end up losing all of his army, thanks to the Hydras. So that will be it. And 3 Lakiz stay alive. The Nexus canceled. More Hydras pouring on in. Immediate emergency situation. We have no defenses at the front. There's a gateway here to try to block things off. The 1 engram in the back. Can the Hydras deal with that? I'm not so sure the answer is yes. They are going to deal with that gateway. Some units on the high ground. I love the random scribes that were able to pop a couple of those off. But yeah, the pylons are going to go down here in a moment. Surely. Yeah, there goes the other one. Oh, it goes down. All right. So no static defense left. The Lakizilisks are dishing out a lot of damage. The Witness was all the way at the ramp. A lot of mistakes coming out of the Shambler's army positioning here, allowing Krankendau to get even more efficacy out of this situation. Remember, no pylon to power those defenses. They can be ignored. And the Ovaleth to snipe the Witness. There's no detection left for Shambler. He needs to make another one, and fast. It's almost done. There is an Optecton out, thankfully, and one of those Lakizilisks goes down just to the splash damage alone. We've got pylons coming back in, but they can be focused down, maybe. Doesn't look like too many more reinforcements are up. The Lakizilisk is going to end up dying, and that will be the extent of that. But hey, still, denying the third, crushing the army. Zerg is happy to trade down their military because they can produce it, in general, a lot faster than the Protoss can. These gateways end up finishing, and he'll end up being used to create more Zealots. See, it's okay. I can't macro. I don't know. What is he even talking about? More hatches coming. More Bactyls coming. More Colin D. Hell yeah. Ah, Newt was in this chat. Shout out Newt, dude. Optecton gonna tickle the Ovaleth. Yeah, I like the overall spread here. The focus fire on the Witness was definitely pretty good. Ovaleth in the clutch there as far as the movement is concerned. Resetting up the third base. Looks like 3 o'clock will be grabbed by Krankendau. Yeah, we're in for a longer game. I really like that Lakiz surround. I mean, they burrow, so they don't block. But if a couple of other units had been pinched off with them, that would have been a pretty good move. I don't know if that was deliberate or if that's just how the army positioning excuse me, worked out. But that was pretty good. Well, we have a moment in time here, so I will take this sip of coffee. And you know what that means, boys. It's time for me to remind you that you, too, can take a sip of coffee, proverbially speaking, by donating if you want to. It's in the bottom right. It's right there. All right, gateways, rogue galleries, makeshift wall coming here on the third, so Krankendau is aware of his opponent's general move here. There has still not been an Iral Iris, but We are going to see 10 pairs of, or sorry, 10 Skither cores. They're not pairs. Dude, imagine if they were pairs. There are no forces here in position to stop this attack, but I'm not super worried about it. I mean, the Uptecton is a little bit concerning, but Crank should be able to deal with most of the Gateway army thanks to his Bactyl count. That pretty much immediately has to make Shambler reconsider his position, especially as his front line dies. There's nothing to stop the Bactylisks from scaling up in their power, and the Zorius are trying to filter onto the front line, which, with the Skiths coming as well, is going to be more than enough to deal with the Uptectons. Yep, you can just immediately dive upon them. Now, Uptectons obviously have the multi-target there, so they're softening up the Skiths, but I'm not so sure it's going to be enough, especially with the Hydras picking them off as well. Although it's, after a certain point, you do want to pull the Skiths back because they are going to take a lot of damage, but at least the wounded ones. But it doesn't look like it's going to be too significant. There goes 2 Uptectons. Do we have any others? We've got double Ancestral Archives, but only one of them was blinking at the time, so... We do have 1 Uptecton left, as well as a Patriarch, so that was what else was being made. Looks like that Ovoleth did end up going down. Oh, 3 o'clock never got made! That might be a bit of a mistake for Crank. And he still doesn't have detection to get rid of this pesky Witness. He's got a lot of workers out, but can't exactly saturate his position here. And with all of the Skiths that he made... I'm looking at his gases to see. Yeah, he hasn't saturated his ridge, it looks like. But he has saturated everything else. Yeah, so he just doesn't have any... Yeah, he doesn't have any, like, fast sort of, like, way to get a lot of Vespene. It's not like he took the bottom left where, or the top right, which are double gas bases. So I feel like Crank could level up his expansion timings. Maybe we'll cast some Hit 'em Up Zerg, formerly Leviathan. Apparently he decided to change back to Hit 'em Up. So Hit 'em Up is playing a lot, and he's played some Terran, played some Zerg, played some Protoss. Try them all. It's funny because he's the kind of guy who, like, you know, just like many other players, they can speak in absolutes sometimes. And he said something to the effect of, like, I'm never touching Terran again. And then I guess he played more Terran. So listen, shout out Hit 'em Up. Cool guy. Happy to see him finding success and practicing some stuff. All right, we do have the Ovoleth, but it's kind of idle here. There's a number of witnesses. I will say Shambler has improved that from the Derelict match to this. Shambler looked a lot better on the spread of his witnesses in this game so far. And that's with Krankendau focusing in the early stages of the game against doing that, right? Now, top right is eventually going to be taken by Crank. He is setting up some defenses and getting the gas saturated over here. Pretty close to being able to afford that all-important tier 2, but can he hold out against this attack? He's out of position. His enemy is allowed to walk straight up, and partially informed by those witnesses, confirming where the enemy forces are. The Archon to deal with the Skith stack. I mean, it's just like Archon versus Muta. You can see the focus fire there on the ball. All go the air units, but hey, there's still a lot of Hydras, still a lot of Bactyls as well. Can the front line stay alive? We're really going to be focusing on how healthy this Patriarch is, because that's the key focus for fire right now. But most of the Hydras are dead, and Krankendau, he had floated a lot of money so that he could eventually get up to his tier 2, but the Patriarch barely scratched at this point, just from some bounce attacks it looks like. And sure, lots of circuits here, but not focusing down that Patriarch means that a lot of the sustained damage here. Oh, there's actually 2 of them, though. That explains a lot. Yeah, a lot of that sustained damage definitely shielded. See, Newt knows. GG's called, just based on that alone. I feel like Krankendau wasn't actually out of this game. But I will say that one of the things that looks like he struggles with is, like, the follow-through on going for the expansion. Top right was never turned into a hatch. You can tell by the minimap. Tier 2 was never actually made, despite having the money for a little bit. And, you know, there's a couple of things where I think in the early stages of the game, Crank is really good at kind of trying to set the pace. But I really liked his attack there earlier on in that top left area. Obviously, like, that's where Shambler's base is, but around the third, I really liked the way that was looking for him. And he had some really nice micro adjustments to deal with things like the Witness with his Ovoleth, but at the end of the day, wasn't able to get it over the line. And again, I feel like even from that position there was play, because, you know, you're Zerg, and you have resources for tier 2, so if you can just hold on, that would be one thing. But losing your third is going to be a big blow, and it didn't look like he was going to be able to uproot that position. maybe due to poor focus fire on behalf of his Bactals. In any event, though, we will be going to the other 2 games in a separate video. So stay tuned and come back tomorrow. We will have that rest of the series on a silver platter for you guys. GG.